this time we're going to have 4 people that are going to come up and share. And don't feel bad about having the Kleenexes. I had one back there too, so it's okay. Tears at times like this are more than healthy and more than expected. So the family would like to have Robert Stanley come and say some things. Bernie Hahn will come right after Robert is finished, and then Kirsten will come and we'll make it through, and then James will come and speak last.
Hello, everybody. I, like John, need some footnotes here. So many emotions and things going through my mind. I want to make sure that I keep focused. So many things that can be shared about Gene that could not possibly be all said in one day. He has definitely impacted all of our lives. So for some of you that know me, some of you that do not, my name is Robert Stanley. I'm a very close friend of Gene Hahn. He was by far one of my closest friends. And there are a lot of memories that we all have of Gene. I would say that there would be an endless list of long memories that we could all fill this entire room with. This room isn't even wide enough or large enough to take the memories that we all share and have with Gene. And I would just like to take a moment just to share a few of mine that I have. It was 1996, Gene and I had met. My wife and I had just recently moved to North Rialto, where at the time, it was a new neighborhood to us. We knew nobody. We had a very young family. We, in that case, were very young. My wife and I were married in 2001. Sorry, 1991. 1991, and we had been... Sorry, honey. It's the nerves, it's not the memory. Oh, wait, it probably is the memory. We were married in 1991 and come to find that the Hahns had been married just a year and a day prior to us. There are a lot of things that we had in common, and not knowing the Hahns over the years that we had shared our lives with them, we got to build a lot of memories and a lot of good times together. And in 1996, as I was inside my garage, cleaning my garage, Gene approaches me, walking down the street onto the sidewalk, and he introduces himself to me. Because we had a young child at the time, 1.5 years old, our oldest son, Tyler, which is now almost 19, comes down and introduces himself to us and shares with us that he too has a very young son that looks almost identical to our oldest son. And the neighbor that lived next door to Gene and Darlene had mentioned to Gene and Darlene, "I believe your son is down at the end of the street." Because in passing, what us from the South call, I don't know if anybody here in the West calls it, we call little blonde-headed kids towheads. He was a little towhead, and so was James. The only difference was James had glasses, but from the back they look identical. So Gene came and introduced himself to me, and which was the beginning of our relationship. And who would have thought that one day would have started 17, almost 18 years worth of memories. So over the next several years, as we lived in that neighborhood together, there must have been 100 or more dinners that we shared together. We were constantly together, going back and forth from house to house. That sidewalk went from light-colored to a shade of our soles of our feet because we walked back and forth so many times. We must have been over at the Hahn's a number of times for dinner, for holidays. everything that you can possibly imagine for birthdays. It was a joyful time. Gene and I had the pleasure of, as our kids started to grow, we had the pleasure of leading a Boy Scout club together. He and I were the Cub Scout leaders. We shared that experience for a number of years, which was very exciting. We got to watch the kids grow, and his past experiences and my past experiences, we came together and was really able to expose a lot of the children to a lot of really neat things. Which brings me to a matter of speaking where I learned that he was a martial artist. And I learned that he was preparing himself for a third-degree black belt. And at that time, not knowing Gene very well, not as good as I know him now, it takes a number of years to really understand people because we are slightly complicated. He comes and asks me, "Robert, I need to take my test for my third degree black belt. Would you mind coming down and assisting me?" I said, "Most certainly I would do that." Having a slight, very minimal understanding of martial arts because I was very interested in it as a young child, but I never had the funds to be able to participate in that kind of an activity. It interested me in martial arts, so I kind of jumped at it, thought, sure, that would be great. Let's go down and show, let's see what we're going to do here. So I walk into his front house, and he's got a camera up on a tripod. He moves all the furniture out. And I'm thinking, okay, what are we doing here? The furniture's being moved around here. How many ways are you going to throw me around? Are you going to hurt me? And we went through several different moves and took pictures of it and video camera. And then he looks at me and says, okay, now what I'm going to ask of you is I'm going to perform a move on you, and which consists of kicking you in the lower. And when you do that, you automatically lean forward and open your mouth. It's just a normal response. Well, when I do that, I'm going to reach into your mouth with my fingers, and I'm going to, it's called a submission move. I'm going to reach in your mouth, squeeze your lower palate, and submit you to the floor. And I said, "You're going to do what?" So, mind you, I don't know Gene that well. I mean, we know each other, but I don't know him that well. "You're going to reach into my mouth." I said, "You need to understand this, this is a good friend that is going to, this is going to take a good friendship here, so, we need to spend a little bit more time together." And so it was kind of a strange moment there, so I went along with it, so I went along with it. So he does the move, and it was quite an interesting time, and that is where I learned that Gene had a love for martial arts. He was expressing to me how he first was brought into it, and the teachings that were behind martial arts, which was pretty interesting to me. But at the time, being a young man myself, just building my career, I didn't have the time to spend a lot of time doing that with him. So he continued going forward with it, and I continued working hard and working for a living and enjoying the time that God was giving me. There were a lot of things that we used to do. We used to go camping together. We must have been all over the place. We went out to the desert, up to the mountains, to the Grand Canyons, to a number of different places. I did not realize just how much he and I had in common. We're both mechanics. We both share almost the same wedding anniversary. We both have a lot of the same interest in sports, fast cars, and outdoors. We really enjoyed the outdoors. So it was really neat to be able to meet a person that you had so much in common with. It was kind of a foundation that I believe that we started upon and grew from there. And speaking of the Grand Canyon, there was a story that we decided to take a family vacation, our family, my family. By this time, we had already had our youngest son, Adam, which is sitting here in the front row. He was just a young little guy. So we and the Hahns and the Womacs decided to go to the Grand Canyons, which we spent a week there, which was quite enjoyable. Well, prior to that, Gene and I were watching the children quite often, spending time watching TV, hanging out, having a good time, while the women were wearing out the mall, doing their exercise laps around the Ontario Mills Mall. So we go to the Grand Canyons, and as fit as they are, doing laps around the Ontario Mills Mall, being triathlons, they decided that they wanted to take a little day adventure down to the Grand Canyon. So we were all excited about it. We thought, okay, so we made a plan to do so. So the ladies decided to do their little adventure down the Grand Canyon, and Gene and I and Rick I believe Rick was going to go with us. We were staying at camp and waiting for the Hahns, or waiting for the ladies to come back up. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. The entire day went by, and we're really starting to worry about the ladies. So we go up to the side of the Grand Canyon, and Gene and I are standing there looking over the canyon with radios, trying to communicate to them with radios. And as sensible and patient of a man as he is, he looks at me and he says, "Do you think we should leave them there?" And I said, "Well, for the moment, probably so." And, and he's got that expression on his face. He raises his eyebrows, and everybody, you all know his expressions. And that was a definite time of memory. And with everything that we had in common, it was easy to see that Gene was a man's man. He was definitely not a man of weakness. He was strong. He was a strong, strong man. And I think if it were not for him and Darlene, I couldn't say where my marriage would be. Because of their relationship with us, Gene taught me a lot. Excuse me. He taught me that you honor God by first honoring your marriage. He was a man of integrity and devotion, a very patient man. He was driven by his faith in God. Being 13 years older than I am, sorry. I respected him. I listened. And then he would always break the tension. He says, he says, I've been through this. And let me tell you something. One thing you can remember, it's always cheaper to keep her. Really? And that was his personality. I mean, he just had a personality that could take something so intense and so stressful and relax it. That was who he was. That's who he is. He would make me laugh. But he'd express his love for you through humor. He had a little bit of a not quirky, that's not the right word, unusual sense of humor about him, where he liked to stir the pot, if you will, sit back and watch. Our wives can justify this. I mean, not justify, but can testify for this. Personally, those that I personally know of is my wife, Darlene, and Jackie. He cared and loved for Rick and I so much that he felt a closeness with our wives, like a brother and sister. And he would razz them. Boy, would he razz them. He would tease them about a lot of things that were true. It was true, but he would razz them. And I would laugh. I would just sit there and laugh. We would be at dinner, and he would be teasing my wife. And of course, it's funny to laugh about life sometimes because we are imperfect people. We make mistakes. We do a lot of silly things. And I would laugh. I would sit back and laugh. And he would just sit there with that look on his face, and my wife would look at me and bam, hit me. I'm like, what'd you hit me for? What are you doing? Because you're laughing. Well, yeah, I'm laughing. It's funny. And he would sit there and just eat it up and just soak it and start laughing about it because he liked to break the tension. He liked to have fun with his relationships. And I said, man, you throw me under the bus, Gene. I can't believe this. And he would laugh more. He would just continue to laugh. So the experiences that we had were really starting to grow in our friendship. And who knew where it was going to take us? In 2002, my wife and I decided to move to Highland. And soon after that, Gene and Darlene followed. They moved out here with us, not with us. They have their own home. They moved out in the same location, same vicinity, which was extremely exciting for us. We went over, saw their housing pad, watched it as it grew, as they were building it. It was a really neat time. We basically raised our kids together. We'd share stories, the frustrations, the excitement, the confusion. We'd sit back and wonder how we were so blessed. There were a number of times where we had certain situations with our home. Remodeling, I'm sure none of you know about remodeling. Remodeling can be a nightmare. And the Hahns would open their home up to us because we would have an air conditioning, electrical heating problem, whatever the case may be during that time. They would open their homes up to us and they would allow us to stay with them. One time they were gone on vacation and we had a situation that happened with our air conditioning unit. It must have been the hottest summer I could think of. And we had no air. So, was it air or heat? It was air. See, I told you she's got a good memory, not me. So, we went over and they weren't even home, and they allowed us to stay in their home. It was like as if we were family. And by that point, I think we were. I remember when he told me that he was getting a taekwondo class of his own. He was going to become an instructor. Man, he was excited. In 2006, my youngest son and I started training with him. Not ever seen Gene in a classroom. Different side of one I never saw. He had a love and a passion for teaching others. He loves his students. You could see it in his face. He's so proud of you guys. He told me when I was at the hospital with him, can I get a couple more of those, please? Sorry, this is really hard for me. He was so thankful and blessed to have shared that part of your lives with him. He was so happy that he got to teach you. You made him proud. And very, very happy. Gene has a heart of servitude. Gene has a heart to give of himself more than he ever asked of other people. There wasn't a thing he wouldn't do for any of you if you asked. As long as it didn't go against God's standard, because he stood strong for that. He was a man of faith, which I loved about him so much. Because of that faith, I think God blessed him so much. He led his students to where they are today, for all the accomplishments that you have done and that you have made. You have done the work, but he led you. We need to give him honor for that. God gave him a job that he had always hoped for. We had discussed so many different things throughout the years. It's kind of funny because in my trade, in heavy construction, in him, he was a diesel mechanic, heavy diesel mechanic. Throughout the years of my career, I have gone to several different places for vendors. And Gene was at every one that I did business with. It's not by accident. He was grateful to have received that promotion as an instructor because I believe in his heart that's who he was. He was a teacher, an instructor. He taught me a lot. And for that, I think for that heart of servitude, God filled his life full of joy. I don't remember seeing him hardly complain at all. He would tease Tarlene about working hard and her sitting home eating bonbons. Which was funny because one day I go over to the house, open the freezer, and she's got bonbons in the freezer. It's the funniest thing. Of course, that's not what she did. She was a wonderful wife, mother, and homemaker. She still is. But he was always happy. He'd go to work. He'd go to class. He'd come to church. He'd go to events. He was always happy. It's because he had God's Spirit in him. And family and friends, I mean, you can look around and this is just a very small amount of the impact that Gene has on people. He's touched each one of us in our lives in some way or another. And people, he cares for people. That was something he truly was passionate about, was people. In the hospital, he and I had a few days to share while he was still able to communicate. And I thank God that I was there. He shared some things. We laughed. We cried. We embraced like brothers. He was sharing the things that he cared so much about for his family, for his children, his wife, his siblings. We cried together. And he had more concern in his heart about those people in his lives that he did not share with God, share about God with. Then he even had concerns of himself. He was more focused about God's plan than he was himself. We all know Gene for a reason. It's not an accident. He touched my life in so many ways. I don't speak of Gene in the past because he is not in the past. He lives with me in my heart and in my mind. He will be a part of me forever. And I know he will of you too, because I know that he's impacted you as much as he has me, because that was who he is. That is who he is. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a teacher, he's an instructor, and he's a friend. And Gene Hahn was my friend, which I will miss dearly. Thank you.